fairer and more united, that acts decisively on the issues that make their lives better and less complicated. And it is up to us, collectively, to deliver that. And I know I speak for everyone here when I say that I very much look forward to hearing your thoughts on these not insignificant challenges that we face, but also on our shared European future. So, Prime Minister Frieden, dear Luc, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, members of Parliament, Luxembourg, birthplace of Robert Schuman, homeland of 3 presidents of the European Commission, and host country to EU institutions, amongst which part of the European Parliament. I'm very pleased to be able to take the floor today in front of you, the representatives of the people of Europe. Prior generations could hardly have imagined this moment. A Luxembourgish Prime Minister speaking on French soil in a former European town to the elected representatives of 27 European countries, united by EU treaties and inspired by shared dreams and ambitions. This session of Parliament, this building, my speech, all of it is the improbable result of history, but what seemed improbable has become reality. A continent torn apart by war and division has become a success story of peace and understanding. And Luxembourg is the proof of that. Throughout the last millennium, my country faced troubles and upheavals caused by other countries. But since the creation of the European Union, we have experienced an unprecedented period of peace and prosperity. This history is the shared history of all of the member states of the European Union, a treacherous cycle of war and ceasefire, of invasion and retreat, of destruction and reconstruction has finally been broken by human courage. Our predecessors, guided by common values, dreamt of a new reality, another destiny for this continent, another future for us and for our children. And all of us, we are their descendants. Peace has replaced war, prosperity has replaced stagnation, and liberal democracy has replaced totalitarian ideologies. Unfortunately, today we find ourselves once again at a turning point, facing forces which wish to reshape our world. Internationally, we are facing turbulent times, technological revolution, economic shifts, climate change, and migratory flows. It is up to us now to dream of a future for our children. And that does not happen by abandoning our values, but by renewing them. It is through these values, liberty, democracy, rule of law, that we will create Europe. This is what makes up Europe, our Europe. Our identity goes beyond simply geography. It is made up of our history, our culture, but particularly our shared values and convictions. It is a choice. It is more than a marriage of convenience. It is a union which is freely chosen.
In the midst of a changing international landscape, it is crucial that we recommit to those European values. For 80 years, Europe's success and way of life were built on international order of rules, treaties, and institutions. Today, that system is under pressure like never before. Too few defend it, too many have lost faith in it. But Europe cannot give up on the rules-based system and international law. We must remain the voice of those values. On the second anniversary of the horrific terrorist attacks on Israel, on this 7th of October, 2 years ago, I would like to reiterate my call for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. This is about humanity, about decency, about the kind of world we want to live in. And for the same reasons, a few weeks ago, in New York, Luxembourg recognized the State of Palestine, because it is the right thing to do, because this two-state solution remains the only viable way forward for lasting peace. And yes, my country continues to believe in peaceful cooperation between nations. That is also why we support Europe in making international agreements. That is why we are still striking trade deals. And that is why countries are still working hard to join our union. Because the values we stand for remain attractive. The merit-based process is set up precisely to ensure that countries follow those rules. And they follow the values of the rule of law, accountability, and democratic governance. But enlargement is today also a question of strategic interests. Our decisions must also consider our own geopolitical objectives, because other powers are competing for influence in those regions. And within candidate countries, there are fierce struggles too, between those who want to move closer to Europe and those who do not. And the recent elections in Moldova show just that. Keeping those countries in an eternal waiting room will push them away from Europe. That is why we need to revive hope and show that accession to the EU is realistic and close. In that spirit, let us set closer and clearer timelines. For instance, it is time to close negotiations and decide on Montenegro's accession next year. In this world, our values also need to be backed up by a credible deterrent. If we cannot deter others, they will dictate their terms and values to us. It is a matter of sovereignty and freedom to make our own choices. That is why Luxembourg will support Ukraine until there is a just and lasting peace. Because a sovereign and safe Ukraine means a sovereign and safe Europe. On European defence, the Commission's proposals are welcome. Raising more funds, scaling up joint procurement and training, building an industrial base. They will strengthen our common defence. We should make full use of our diversity and foster specialization. If we build on our respective strengths, the sum of our efforts can be much bigger. For instance, my country's world-leading expertise in secure satellite systems can be a contribution that benefits the security of Europe as a whole by being, for instance, part of the defence space shield. That's also why we support the European Iris Squared project. This will be a key element of a truly European defence. Closer to home, we also need to guard against those who challenge our values. A democracy can only work on the basis of trust, and such trust is earned through concrete action and progress. I believe that democracies can deliver. Around the world they have delivered, and we need to make sure that they can continue to deliver. That is central to their survival. We, the Council, as much as this Parliament and the Commission, need to deliver. And we need to deliver quickly for citizens across Europe, in small and large member states alike. With increasingly fierce international competition, we need to be ready to rethink our decision-making processes. We should revisit the idea of a Europe of concentric circuits, with a smaller core group of member states that would be more integrated, always allowing others to join this core group when they wish to do so. We have no time to lose on dealing with the challenges our citizens and our countries face today. We need bold ideas and bold actions to maintain Europe's role on the world stage. And let me highlight a few more areas in which quick and tangible progress is urgent. Eine florierende Wirtschaft.
A flourishing economy remains the basis of our well-being and our social system. Therefore, it is important that we boost our economy and create jobs. This must remain a priority. We do not lack in analysis. The Letta report is very clear. The Draghi report is clear. Europe needs to remove bureaucracy. The implementation sometimes lasts too long. The omnibus proposals are an important first step, but we are missing the necessary urgency and the right approach. We need to act quickly and comprehensively. There are more steps that need to be taken. By the end of the year, we need a clearly defined time frame with milestones, similarly to the Single European Act and the introduction of the euro. What we need is a very clear signal to ourselves and to the rest of the world that there's a real shift in Europe. And two key aspects of that are real progress in the single market and also in the savings and investment union. The single market is the motor that drives the European economy, whether it's a harbour in Rotterdam or Antwerp, or the automotive sector in Central Europe, finance sector in Luxembourg. European economy flourishes where it can act seamlessly across borders. We need to focus on removing technical obstacles. They might seem benign, but they can cause real problems for everyday life. For example, territorial supply constraints. Every year, that brings an extra cost of 14 billion euros. Or the fact that we have different consumer protection regulations that particularly affects our small and medium-sized companies that have to run supply chains across borders. So these types of steps we need to take that can only be done through European cooperation between member states, but also between Parliament and Council. Strengthening the single market needs to go hand in hand with tangible steps forward in the savings and investment union. Here we need an action plan with targets to help make investment in Europe more attractive. So this can be done through a massive simplification of level 2 and 3 tax, by reducing national gold plating, by having a better management of our existing investment products, particularly pension products, by simplifying access to investment opportunities, and to enable securitization for all. With these and other measures, we can help revive Europe as a place for business. We can create growth and jobs, prosperity and tax revenue. And with all of this, we can tackle the challenges we face from security, defence, social policies, climate change, digitalisation. The single market needs to remain open. This is a historic achievement with a Luxembourgish name, Schengen. As well as economic trade, Schengen is a clear testament to the solidarity and tolerance of European citizens. It's an expression of peace in Europe. Wars can shift borders, but the lack of borders is a clear sign of lasting peace. If we have a long-term return to border controls, this would not just be negative for our economy, but it would be a step backwards for the whole of the European project and the values that it embodies. It is therefore in our common interest to find a way to permanently remove these internal border controls. It might be understandable in some cases to have temporary border controls, but this is not a long-term solution. Schengen is made up of three equally important components: free movement within the EU, police cooperation, and common controls at our external borders. Having real controls over irregular migration can only really be ensured at our external borders. We need to have a policy that brings the heart and the mind together. The right to asylum must be safeguarded. It is a non-negotiable aspect of our common humanity. In individual countries in Europe, regular migration is needed for economic development. What we need is a quick and full implementation of the Asylum and Migration Pact in our member states. What we need is a political action plan so that we can slowly phase out internal border controls. With all of these actions, we can help strengthen our values. We can strengthen these freedoms, freedom of movement in Schengen, economic freedom in the single market, ideological freedom as part of our democracy. These are our strengths. In a world where a lot of people wish to build walls once again, the EU stands for openness, solidarity, and cooperation. These are the historical lessons we have learnt through our union, and it is our strategic answer to the challenges of the future. Some of these challenges remind us that actually none of what we've achieved can be taken for granted, and other challenges we're seeing for the first time in our generation. But the solutions come from a union of two strengths which have carried us this far: our values and our unity. That is the real meaning of European success. A country alone, no matter which country, cannot overcome these challenges, whereas no challenge cannot be overcome if we work together. This is a responsibility that falls on all of us: Council, Parliament, Commission. It is a heavy responsibility, yes, but it is also encouraging, because it means that we are the masters of our own destiny. A quarter of a century has passed in this new millennium, and we need to ensure that now is the time of Europe, a time of imagination, where we take on the ambition of previous generations, a time of courage, where we dare to open a new chapter in our common history. A time of determination, where we use our common values to benefit our citizens. Let's do it, and do it now. We have no time to lose. Long live Europe.
Europe. Lang lebe Europa. Vive Europa. Merci.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Frieden. And now we will start with the first round of political groups, starting with the President of the EPP Group, Manfred Weber.
Frau Präsidentin,
Madam President of the European Parliament, dear Prime Minister, dear Luc, colleagues, first of all, I should like to thank you, as well as the people of Luxembourg. Wish you congratulations for the new Grand Duke and wish him every success in his new duties. And he represents Luxembourg perfectly, because he sets no real store by pomp and ceremony, but rather by support for the people and embodies Europe's and Luxembourg's strength and pays homage to Europe's unity. Luxembourg has always been one of the most European countries in the European Union, and just a few years on from the end of the Second World War, which for Luxembourg meant occupation by Nazi Germany, Luxembourg made the choice for Europe, which was a courageous choice on the part of your politicians, and Luxembourg has always been part of our defence union and Schengen. In 1985, Luxembourg was one of the founding members of Schengen, and that has meant 40 years of freedom of movement for us all. And Luxembourg has for many years been one of the leaders of Europe in the shape of Jacques Santer, Jean-Claude Juncker, and of course Schuman, with whom the idea of Europe was born. Now, as a finance minister in your own country, you oversaw the transition to the single currency, and you, of course, guided the people of Luxembourg through the financial crisis and did what you could to protect jobs in very difficult times. And as Prime Minister, you have shown that Luxembourg can rebuild and become more resilient. And over many years, you have shown it's important to think collectively when it comes to our social and economic resilience. And now you're trying to boost house building, something which matters most to people. And you have shown real leadership, and leadership in the best EPP tradition. Luxembourg has always served as a bridge between nations as well as a symbol of European unity, and quite rightly you have written that Europe is a necessity. Let me remind you what you said, and you said that if we opt for national solutions, then we will be unable to proceed. What we need is a stronger Europe. That is the way you have put it, and that is why a defence union is something which is centre stage for us at the EPP. We really are poised on the brink of a historic turning point. We have to work towards a defence union because in terms of cybersecurity, people readily understand that it's only by a common European vision that we'll be able to protect them. And you've described our technological challenges as well. We have to become independent. We have to look at the situation of drones, for example, which overshadowed the meeting in Denmark last week. I mean, we are being put to the test by Putin, and it's important that we determine which measures are now necessary. But we are all well aware of the fact that Luxembourg is poised to play a leading role in this process. Jacques Santer and Jean-Claude Juncker created the euro, and now Luxembourg will help us bring into being a European defence union. It is essential, but we are building on a strong Luxembourg. Thank you.
Now, on behalf of the S&D Group, Marc Angel.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, Prime Minister, Commissioner, colleagues. On behalf of the Socialist and Democrat Group, I would like to welcome the Prime Minister here to this House of European Democracy. This is a place that incarnates history, but more importantly, the future of our Union. Luxembourg and Europe are a historic couple. We are joined by a shared destiny. Luxembourg is a founding country and has been through all the major phases of the EU, often in the vanguard of progress that's been made. And it has seen that its fate will be a shared fate, and it has to place its confidence in Europe to do that. Europe has always taken our country further. Today, once again, faced with uncertain and tumultuous times, we have to once again restate our confidence in a strong and united Europe. Together, we will be able to face up to the threats we face, protect our continent, and breathe new life into our economies and industries. Sometimes that will be done through simplifying our regulatory framework, but we have to be reassured that the socialists will never sacrifice our environmental and social ambitions on the altar of blind deregulation. Together, we will defend our values and the rule of law, which were the founding cornerstone of Europe. To face up to these challenges, Europe needs an ambitious MFF that meets our objectives, but also is up to the expectations of our citizens. We also need to ensure that we can
work more effectively, overcome blockage, try to avoid attempts at blackmail and prepare for the future. And here, Prime Minister, that has to be done through targeted treaty change. Europe also has to respond to the cost of living crisis, the housing challenge, and strengthen social rights. Colleagues, the Luxembourg social model has for a long time been a source of inspiration for Europe, and I'm proud of that. But I'm extremely concerned about some recent decisions that have been taken by your government, Prime Minister, which call into question this model and weaken social harmony. I hope you will reconsider those changes and will come at European level in Brussels and Strasbourg to ensure that we see a deeper, fairer social Europe. Finally, Prime Minister, I would like to welcome your support, your courage, that of your party, to ensure that the right to abortion is written into the Luxembourg Constitution. Against a backdrop of women's rights being attacked, this is key progress. I hope that Luxembourg will inspire Europe and that you can convince your friends in the EPP and in the Council to ensure that this fundamental right becomes part of the Charter of Fundamental Rights in the European Union. Prime Minister, I'm counting on you and on Luxembourg to continue to be at the vanguard of Europe and to support the European project. Long live Europe. Thank you very much.
Now, on behalf of the PFE Group, King Agal.
Elnök asszony, miniszterelnök úr.
President, Ministers, today Europe is in a period of crisis. It cannot find its place in a changing world order. We have deviated from the path marked out by our founding fathers. They had made it a success in the 20th century. It was originally there to create peace and security for its citizens. It is important to respect national interests and to maintain the balance between Brussels and the member states. Nevertheless, today what we see is quite the contrary. There are efforts to further centralise, and this imperils the future of the EU. Instead of peace, now the President of the Commission talks about the EU being at war, talks about sending weapons. We could end up embroiling the EU in a conflict. And we also see the consequences of the far migratory policy of Brussels. It endangers our women and children. We see increased anti-Semitism. Instead of prosperity, there's a lack of competitiveness due to all of these green policies. Brussels bureaucracy is negating the sovereignty of the member states. This is in complete contradiction to the cooperation between sovereign states. If there is no change, the EU will end up disintegrating. There are those who want change, who want the EU to deal with real problems. And I think the Czech elections show that the only real alternative to protect Europe is today the Patriots. Thank you.
Patrick Yaki.
Dziękuję Pani Przewodnicząca. Panie Premierze, właściwie...
Thank you, President. Prime Minister, you referred to Robert Schuman. That's quite surprising. We're very proud of Robert Schuman and the values that he defended. You referred to climate as one of those values. Now, I don't know, but I don't think Robert Schuman defended the climate. But he did place great value on one thing that you didn't mention, which is Christianity. He said that Europe must be Christian or it will not exist. He wrote that Europe is based on Christianity because it needs a soul that you are destroying. You are fighting to ensure that member states no longer have their veto right. But in 1950, Robert Schuman said that the European Union should never become one single country. He saw the EU as a community of nations that were anchored in their own traditions. I also want to say that You talk about the fight against Russia, but I don't know if you know whether Germany has asked for the arrest of the Ukrainian who blew up Nord Stream. So what does this mean? Russia can blow up hospitals, but you can't do anything to attack Nord Stream. You said that we have to fight Russia, but we're not seizing frozen assets in Europe. There's another sanction package, but they're not going to change anything. Russia's laughing at us. Then the Green Deal. This is absolutely outrageous. We see that oil is becoming a lot more expensive in Europe than elsewhere. CO2 emissions are not going down. They're going up year on year. So we've lost out even in comparison with China. It's time to see a radical change in Europe. What do we need to do? Well, we have to get back to our roots. As you said, quite rightly, Prime Minister, get back to what Robert Schuman said. Europe was strong back there because it was based on values and its own soul. What you're suggesting today is an endless path. We need to see proper change.
To the President of Renew Europe Group, Valérie Ayer.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. Prime Minister, welcome to the Parliament. Your country has always been a great European country since the times of Robert Schuman through to Schengen, the coal and steel community, and through to today. Luxembourg really marks the history of our continent, and your country has had statesmen who have believed in the project, who have helped to build it, and also by virtue of your stability, you've always been unwavering in the construction of Europe and in the positions and messages that are conveyed through you. And I'd also like to pay tribute to Xavier Bettel, who, before you, was a great Prime Minister and was a true representative of the Liberal family and is a member of your coalition government. You have an EPP Renew coalition government which is resolutely pro-European, and this is in keeping with a long line of governments of Luxembourg. Europe is under attack. It is threatened by a hybrid war on its borders as well as by a trade war. So now more than ever before, we need your commitment. We need your commitment in a coalition of the willing for Ukraine, your willingness to help in the Middle East and promote a two-state solution, as well as your assistance in the fight against climate change, and also flying the flag for freedom, our values, and respect for the law. We also need to improve our competitiveness and put into practice the Letta and Draghi reports. I should also like to pay tribute to Commissioner Hansen and your commitment for a strong multi-annual budget, and again your determination to harmonise corporate taxation as well as moving forward on own resources in future. And you will play a decisive role in the upcoming package, and we are counting on your support. Your country, Prime Minister, stands for standing for who it is, remaining what it is. We set great store by our social market economy, and as Liberals, that is the fight we must wage and win together. Thank you.
And now I give the floor to the co-president of the Greens Group, Bas Eickhout.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you also, dear Prime Minister from Luxembourg. As a co-Benelux member, I warmly welcome also your words on the leadership of Europe, and that is, of course, something we always expect from Luxembourg, and it's very great to hear also your words on Ukraine, the accession, and also, of course, on today, the 7th of October. When you are talking about leadership, I think what we also need in Europe is that we start talking honest to each other. Because I think what one of the problems is that, yes, we all talk about leadership, but then stay a bit general. And therefore, if we are talking about our international credibility, we very much welcome that Luxembourg was one of those countries that was accepting, indeed, recognizing the Palestinian state. But we do not know where Luxembourg stands on the proposals of the Commission on further sanctions on the Netanyahu government. So it would be good if you speak out, because there will be an oncoming council, and the council is being blocked. And I think a country like Luxembourg can really unblock matters, but that also means that you need to speak out very clearly in this plenary on where you stand. I see you know where we stand, but it would be good to have that also in this plenary. And the same goes on Orban. We need to call him by name on his problem and his veto that needs to change. And then on competitiveness, I have to say, it's a bit old school what you're saying. Simplification, internal markets, mobilization of capital. But what we really need is clarity where our economy should go to. Investors need to know where Europe is heading to. That is the Green Deal as a provision. It would be good to hear that and not only talking about simplification, but also where do we need lead markets? How do we put the clean industrial deal into practice? That's the guidance that we need from Luxembourg as well. Last point. It would be very good for a country as Luxembourg to also take a step on changing the treaty, but then mainly on changing and getting rid of unanimity, not only on foreign affairs, but it would be great if Luxembourg says we need to get rid of unanimity on taxation. That would be a lovely statement by Luxembourg. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor now to the president of the Left Group, Manon Aubry.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister of Luxembourg, you are the head of a gang. I don't know how to put it otherwise. You have a member state that actively promotes tax evasion, that takes tax revenue from other countries. We're talking about hundreds of millions of euros that are going into tax havens. Now, if you talk about a tax haven, you think it was the Cayman Islands or some faraway tropical island. But no, about half of these go into European tax havens, and amongst them, your country, Luxembourg, the Grand Duchy that is helping people amass grand fortunes. You were the finance minister during the LuxLeaks scandal, so you are directly complicit, but you have never answered for that. Since that scandal, you became president of a bank in Luxembourg. I can hear you respond that all of this is in the past, that Luxembourg has changed, but that is not true. OpenLux showed that a large proportion of Luxembourg companies were show companies, and 9 out of 10 CEOs were foreign. So I might be naive, Prime Minister. Are you in favour of these models of tax invasion? Your neighbouring countries are paying the price for this, losing 20% of tax revenue in Europe. And this tax evasion has transformed all of our member states. In 1975, the Commission had looked at corporate tax revenue of 40 to 45%, and now we have a minimum rate of 15%. That, of course, is not without consequence. Multinational companies are not paying their fair rate of tax, and so it's European citizens that have to make up that difference. So rather than pillaging from European citizens, let's go and get this money back from tax havens. Let's end unanimity in matters of tax havens so you don't have your right to veto, you and others who are head of these tax havens in Europe. We need to tax billionaires because in all of these types of scams, we have to end those who are in charge and get back the money they've stolen. Thank you.
Of the ESN Group, René Aust.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, well, this is Europe. This is supposed to be the subject of debate this morning, but it's more about what Europe was. Europe was once a powerhouse of progress, a continent of inventors, engineers, artisans and entrepreneurs, a continent in which ideas were born and global markets were conquered. But these days, there's no European company in the world top 20, and that's no coincidence. That is the upshot of policies which suffocate an entrepreneurial spirit and which supplants innovation with bureaucracy freedom with fear. We are faced with a series of bans on combustion engines and then a Green Deal which destroys industry. I mean, just look at production or output figures. We report on them constantly. Our best brains and companies are emigrating. Whilst we have the US and Asia investing, Europe is quibbling about quotas. They are doing business and we're regulating. And that doesn't generate prosperity, simply leads to Europe losing out on competitiveness. And if we want to save Europe, then we have to release the strength of European peoples, freedom for entrepreneurs, researchers and workers. Politics and bureaucracy aren't going to make things better. It's only if we place our trust in the people of Europe. Let's unleash their force, lower taxes, less red tape, fewer prohibitions, rules and regulations. We should look to their know-how, knowledge and talent and courage, not to politicians. Let's go back to a Europe of achievement, of courage and innovation, a Europe that really wants to progress. It wants to help to shape quantum computing and AI, a Europe which is at the center of Europe rather than looking to the future with fear. Less centralism, more nation state, less fear, more freedom, no mass immigration, either legal or illegal. Instead, we want more deportations. That will make Europe stronger again, and we will have a Europe of sovereign nations and fatherlands. Thank you.
I give the floor now to Isabel Wissler-Lima, 1.5 minutes.
Monsieur le Premier Ministre, merci.
Prime Minister, thank you for having focused on the values that unite our European Union. Today, they are particularly at risk because totalitarian ideology is gaining ground. We have to be clear. Where we see illiberalism setting up, then democracy falls away. We see an undermining of rule of law. They want to ensure that we change politics and undermine justice. And it will be the arbitrary that will reign and will win. We have to fight against the existential threats around us. We need to have common rules about social medias and these opaque, polarizing algorithms. This social media is used by criminals, by unscrupulous people, foreign powers who want to destroy our democracy and our freedom. We can't allow that to happen. The European Union is working on this, but we have to do more and do it more quickly and effectively. I also want to refer to the direct military threat that we face from Russia. We cannot be naive or disunited. The days before the attack in February 2022, we saw that Russia was laughing at us and the United States, saying that they had no intention of sending its troops into Ukraine. For our own security, we have to continue to help Ukraine to invest massively in our own defence and, above all, to build a shared European defence. Prime Minister, today, more than ever, the European Union must be united. Through its history, Luxembourg can act to bring European countries together. This is something that we need greatly right now.
Now, Elio Di Rupo, 1 minute.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, Prime Minister, dear neighbour, I think both our countries have contributed significantly to the evolution of the European Union. But what our citizens want now is some serenity. You have talked about the many challenges the EU is facing, having a real industrial policy, guaranteeing decent income for our citizens, tackling poverty, ensuring the physical safety of all, of course, having a rightful role on the international stage. We need to rethink Europe, and I welcome your speech. Now, how do we do this? We are 27. Now, you talked possibly about other modalities, but how are we going to actually achieve this? Because I think it's impossible with 27. I think we need to recreate a new dynamic to move forward. You're such a good listener. You have the heads of the political groups here. We're all listening and we're counting on you, Prime Minister. Thank you.
Monsieur De Lupo, now Harald Wilimski, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Madam President, I should like to start with all of you. And unexpectedly, perhaps, I'd like to thank all of you for having observed a minute of silence for the tragic death of Charlie Kirk yesterday evening. I really do think that that is the best way for us to treat with one another. And I think that that way we can gain in balance and fair-mindedness. So I just want to thank all of you for that. Now, this weekend, of course, have seen the re-election of Andrej Babiš in the Czech Republic. We've not said much about that. And if we cannot prevent that, then the incoming Prime Minister of the Prime Minister will be just him, and Viktor Orban is somebody who will want to see that reform alliance, and it will be strengthened. I mean, we are seeing chaos now in France. We are seeing what can happen then, and we've got Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen as well. And with all of them, I think we really can turn the situation around. And we've got Herbert Kickl, of course, in Austria, got far more support than any of the other parties. And so when you're talking about, who should be Chancellor, well, certainly, we can push all of this forward in Austria as well, and then just look at the situation. Alice Weidel in Germany, somebody who is really in the hearts of people, and with the right support, she could go right to the top. And so I know you don't want to see that come to pass, but you've just got to accept it. That is what the majority of the population think. That is the way they want things to go. And I think that you would be smart if you were to realize that. You were to realize that we've got ever-growing circles from our electorate, and we, the patriots, we see the way forward. We've got the numbers, we've got the figures. We have seen otherwise that the continent is going from bad to worse.
Monsieur le Premier Ministre. Prime Minister, you spoke about a concentric circle of Europe to stand to the challenges of agility and swiftness that European decision-making needs in the international context. Indeed, we must stop trying to do everything with 27 member states. We have to respect the democratic choices of each individual member state and not go to the Jacobism of the European system. And that would go even farther with the end of unanimity, and that would round counter to the democratic choices of member states. You talked about de-bureaucratization as a priority, and taking apart the Green Deal, which is a catastrophe for our industrials and for our farmers and for everyone. Now, just a few seconds ago, it was disgusting. We heard Luxembourg accused of being a tax haven, but really, what we note is that many countries, like France, first and foremost, we know that Europe has become a regulation nightmare. We must put an end to that. We talked about border checks. That is needed, indeed, because the external borders of Europe are a sieve for migrants and for unfair trade amongst businesses. Thank you.
1.5 minutes.
President, Prime Minister, dear Luc, we come from the same countries, but that's just about the only thing we have in common. Since our independence in 1939, we know that our answers to security and economy depends on our partners, on our neighbours. The experience which we have within the 27 and the European Union is also something that is going to move towards a global scale. To be big is not shocking. To be small is not necessarily a bad thing. A small country can really contribute compared to large countries that can simply issue a veto. So we sometimes feel threatened within the EU, but we count on you in Council to protect our values. We are going to be enlarging soon, and we count on you to put an end to this idea that enlargement is possible without changing the way it works. We'd like to see you contribute to prepare the ground to launch the idea on the amendment of the treaties within the framework of a European convention. From a European point of view and an economic point of view, we need to face up to American protectionism, to Chinese dumping, and we hope that Mario Draghi's recommendations and Enrico Letta's recommendations can be taken on board. 2025 has made us discover what we expect or can expect if we don't do something within the European Union. There's not a lot of people we can really count on. Over the years, we have fought for democracy, liberal democracy on multilateral order based on rules. We wanted to survive and live for these values. But in Ukraine, people are dying for the same values. It's not so much the enlargement of the EU or NATO that Russia fears. Our American ally, however, fears a multilateral order based on rules and a European Union that defends it. Our American ally is afraid of the Union. It actually detests the Union. So it is now time that we need to defend our values. It is perhaps not 27, it's 25, and possibly since Sunday only 24. But about half of the colleagues make up this parliament, and each and every one of us need to fight on the platform, the von der Leyen platform. In 2025, we've lived through treason and humiliation, and we need to try and work in the political families in the European Parliament to really fight for our values. You are a statesman, and we hope that the centre will remain the centre. Thank you.
The more you stick to time, the more we can include members who can speak. So please, Metz, 1.5 minutes. Let's see.
Monsieur le Premier Ministre.
Prime Minister, Commissioner, President, it's a pleasure to welcome you here in the European Parliament. We've talked about competitiveness and simplification for businesses. So let's talk about competitiveness, yes, but within a socially just and ecologically responsible framework. And that's essential for citizens and for future generations. Let's take housing. And to bring down energy costs, we need insulated houses for everyone, not just for those who are well off. Without empathy, our societies will crumble. So we need bold and human leaders who will take the right steps, who will build a society based on kindness and subsidiarity. We cannot govern a country the way you run a private company. It just doesn't work. True leadership isn't just being at the service of the banks, the lobbies, and shareholders. It's about listening to people. That's what leadership is all about in Europe and in Luxembourg. So yes to simplification, but no to deregulation that harms people and the planet. So how can we strengthen public services so that we protect the most vulnerable, the workers and the climate? You come from the private sector and you know that lack of action is far more expensive. So you're responsible not only for your actions, but also for the actions you do not take.
1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Prime Minister, how will the growing defence spending be financed? And the care for the ageing population in Europe? Why did the public deficit grow even when the times were good? And why is it now slowing down the necessary investments, thanks to which we will beat China and the USA? The scapegoats for the indebtedness triggered by the euro crisis were found in the countries that ended up in the spiral of domestic debt while saving the banks. However, the real guilty ones were countries like Luxembourg and the Netherlands, countries with the help of which multinational large companies have been able to not pay their taxes. That money is now missing in our services and well-being. Unfair competition has also driven out honest European companies from the market. The EU, a common market, will not be competitive and sustainable as long as some of its members keep tripping up all the others. It is particularly grotesque of a country which is anyway one of the countries which most benefit from the EU and one of the main places of our institutions. Mr. Prime Minister, the OECD has also forced other EU countries to make a corrective move and shape up their taxation. However, we are not even close to the finishing line when we look at the list of the countries which make it possible to avoid taxes for the biggest earners. We still have the Netherlands and Luxembourg at the top of that list. I invite you to lead by example in building a sustainable future for our children and the Europe.
Frank Droze, 1 minute.
Frau Präsidentin, Herr
Madam Chair, colleague, well, the green climate ideology is turning Europe into a museum, an industrial museum. You know, we can get lots of Asian visitors and people are benefited by all these immigrants that are running through the streets and people chasing and pursuing anti-Semitic views. This is Europe somehow, but in the most recent debates, and if we look at Russian wealth, and the Luxembourg Prime Minister was very skeptical. He said we can't simply take the wealth of a country without any legal basis. And if we take Russian wealth, assets, the Europe in the long term will no longer be a reliable financial market. So this type of mafia politics, at the end of the day, the taxpayer will be paying the bill. And our immigration policies and economic policies don't work. Europe, we need to move in the right direction, and Europe should look more like the United States. Thank you.
Heiser, 1 minute.
Madam President, Prime Minister, welcome to our chamber. Today, you should have spoken in Luxembourgish, at least for a small portion of your speech. Of all of the countries represented here, Luxembourg is the only one where the representatives do not have the right to speak in their own language. Therefore, I should like to call on you to swiftly to come up with an administrative arrangement with the Council and the Parliament, much like has been done by the Council conclusions of 2005, negotiated under the auspices of Luxembourg. Luxembourg has met all of the conditions. It is constitutionally recognized, it is our administrative language, and it is spoken throughout the entire country. Now, as pertains to Europe, it is time to review the treaties via an intergovernmental conference followed up by a referenda in the member states. The Commission and other member institutions continue to gobble up the authorities, for example, in defense, health, or housing. Moreover, the Commission is not transparent. Therefore, we must act. Europe cannot be a federal construction. It must be developed as a Europe of sovereign nations. Thank you.
Give the floor now to Siegfried Muresan, 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. Prime Minister Frieden, welcome to the European Parliament. Luxembourg has been at the heart of European integration for more than 70 years, a founding home of European institutions and a symbol of unity, stability and confidence in the European project. You have recently stated that Europe is a necessity. I think this is now more true than ever. We are seeing autocrats cooperating closer around us. It's clear that we, those who believe in a strong, in a united European Union, those who believe in the ideals of the European project, have to cooperate even closer and have to deliver on what the people of Europe expect. That is, of course, firstly, safety, stability, security, and secondly, a prosperous, modern, future-oriented, innovative economy. And we can only be safe if we all contribute to this. And on this note, I would like to thank you, Prime Minister, for the contribution which the people of Luxembourg are making to the security of all of us. Luxembourg is deploying European soldiers. In my home country, Romania, less than 200 kilometers away from the border to Ukraine, and we have there Luxembourgish soldiers with soldiers from other EU member states training together soldiers and making sure that our national armed forces from all over Europe are becoming stronger and can protect us. That effort of Luxembourgish soldiers keeps Luxembourg safe, makes Luxembourg safer, and makes all of us safer. And just a word on enlargement. You're absolutely right in your appeal that we take leadership when it comes to enlargement. Candidate countries, the more they reform, the more they modernize, the better for our security and stability. They should become EU members only once they fulfill the criteria, but we should do more in helping them to fulfill the criteria, and once they fulfill the criteria, the message needs to be sure the door is open for them to join the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Marit Mai, 1 minute.
Yes, thank you, President. Dear Prime Minister, dear colleagues, the cooperation between Luxembourg, the Netherlands and Belgium is special. For decades, the Benelux has seen economic, political, cultural and social cooperation and integration at our border regions and between our countries. And this cooperation ensures that these three founding member states have a strong say in the European Union, also thanks to this Prime Minister. And I would like to thank this Prime Minister for something else. My body, my choice. The right for women to make our own decisions, for bodily integrity and bodily autonomy. As a Christian Democrat leading a centre-right coalition, you support embedding abortion into the Constitution. Christian Democrats and Conservatives in this Parliament can learn from the Luxembourgish Prime Minister. And so can the government from the Netherlands, where abortion still officially is a criminal act. Abortion should be decriminalized. Access to safe abortion should be acknowledged as a right in my country and in the European Charter on Fundamental Rights. Thank you, Prime Minister. My body, my choice.
I give the floor now to Alexandre Varro. 1 minute.
Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Prime Minister, we see since 2024 in France, the globalist and progressist order is crackling. It's a return to the nations. The very foundation that Europe was built on is fragile, and decisions taken on that foundation are unstable. If the European Union is truly democratic, then it must take note of this change, this sea change, before it makes irreversible mistakes. And that's why I want to raise the question of enlargement. If you're going to have a forced solution for the benefit of 6 or 7 countries, well then, from our perspective, for Montenegro and Ukraine enlargement, we're going to see a Trojan horse for European federalism, a pretext that's going to be used to reopen the treaties and pursue federalist policies and to ever increase Europe's powers. I'd like to hear your position on that.
Tovani, 1 minuto.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, Minister, Prime Minister, in just a few minutes' time, this Parliament will have to express its opinion on the immunity of a member of Parliament who is accused of violence against individuals who had different ideas than that individual did. Now, I hope that the Parliament will be proud in defending the rights under the auspices of democratic rights. Charlie Kirk was killed by people who thought that their ideas were superior to any others. Now, Joseph Beck in 1957 said, "In no place in the world these ideals come to our minds or our eyes in the splendid way and spiritual way and material way as they do in Rome, in this supreme of antique Christian civilization. back to eternal values that form the foundations of this civilization. European states should live in the dignity of their wonderful past. Thank you.
Mantovani, now Damien Boselager, 1 minute.
Prime Minister, let me ask you quite plainly, will you support the United States of Europe? You said it yourself, this table here, this House only exists because before us, people thought about a better future. They understood that they don't want to stay in the horrors of the Second World War and build something that brings Europe together. But now, you were there last week in Copenhagen, and I wonder, where is the spirit of European unity and dreaming big gone? You had the chance to decide on sanctions against Russia, to take the Russian assets and give them to Ukraine. You had the chance to build the drone wall that Mr. Weber was talking about, and you had the chance to do what Marc-Angèle said, which is opening the treaties to actually improve this union. So I'm wondering, where are we headed if our leaders, the 27 prime ministers, don't have the courage anymore to think about a better future? So let me ask you again, will you support a United States of Europe? What will you do to bring treaty change to the 27 leaders? What will you do to make sure that our children have a better European Union, that we have a defense army, that we have a government that is elected by this House, by the European Parliament? What will you do to bring the United States of Europe into reality? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I give the floor now to Zoltán Tár, 1.5 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Prime Minister, we Hungarians and we Europeans have learned, because we had to learn, that only through dialogue and cooperation can we achieve what is equally important to all European nations, peace and prosperity. What the Union was not prepared for, however, and didn't believe possible for a long time, that the leader of a country, the outgoing Prime Minister of my country, would abuse this dialogue and cooperation and unlawfully use what belongs to all of us for his own purposes and interests. While the Hungarian Prime Minister, ahead of many others, talked about stopping illegal migration, he himself unleashed thousands of human traffickers released from prison on the other EU member states. With his hypocrisy, he has discredited the policy of strict border control for many years, to which we have only slowly returned at the European level. I hope that we will soon reach the point where the EU will also provide funding for the fence protecting our common border. And while the current Hungarian government talks about a European economic downturn, all the data shows that this is a peculiar phenomenon, and they are abusing the Hungarian economy with 60 different types of taxes. The TISA policy is legal certainty, low taxes, increased pensions, and decent standard of living, because Europe has to be strong, and Hungary has to be strong to be able to contribute.
Now, Nicola Zingaretti, for 1 minute, please. Thank you, President, for your words. This palace was not built by happenstance, but because of the foresightedness of the post-war period, and Europeans must be more courageous, open a door of change. The Europe that we have known to date has maintained peace, development, and democracy, but it's not enough. The danger is decline, going back to nationalism, and the uncomfortableness of those who see the future as worse than the present. Now, we know that nationalism is not the solution. It is an expression of anger, something that requires courage from Europe. We have to move towards innovation, re-establish our social model, bet on common policy, making sure that we are front and center, and not towards a war amongst ourselves, but common defense. Act, therefore. We need federalism, peace, against nationalism and against war. What we need at this time and this moment in history is to transform Europe into a rhetorical world. We don't want it to become something that just a word for doing nothing. Thank you. Mr. Vanacci.
Ministro. Prime Minister, you gave us your vision of Europe, but the image that we have looks cloudy and distorted. Look, I advise you to find another optician because, you know, the situation that citizens suffer from on this continent is complete failure. Social democratic leadership failure, which has flooded us with illegal immigrants which commit crimes and erode our rule of law. Europe of energy, which is more expensive than anywhere else in the world. Europe of the Green Deal, which has desertified our industrial network and has made us poorer. Europe of insignificance at international level, as you can clearly see, especially in the case of the Russian-Ukraine conflict and the huge tragedy in the Middle East. Because of this reality, Prime Minister, we patriots feel that we need to change this Europe. And we will see you again, hopefully, when the fog has lifted. Thank you.
Now, Diego Solier, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Prime Minister Frieden. Europe was built to unite people. But today, millions of citizens feel that they're not represented by Europe. And they feel that they're being drowned by regulations, by rules. They can't farm. The farmers can't farm. Young people have no future. Borders not being checked. It can't be a system for collective fiscal tax punishment. We need to have a Europe that serves people on a daily basis. We do want a Europe that's strong. We don't a Europe that doesn't silence, a Europe that cooperates and listens to the needs of member states. We want a different Europe, a better Europe, a more humane, secure and freer Europe.
Paolo Cunha, 1 minute.
President, Prime Minister, Commissioner, Europe cannot be a spectator in its future. It must be a leader. The many thousands of Portuguese that live in Luxembourg work hard in dignity, and they are proof that mobility is strength, not a threat, that Europe is stronger when it welcomes with rules and integrity, but Europe needs more ambition. The world context means that we need technology and security, and in Luxembourg and Portugal, we can work together with the Azores, and the Atlantic can be a new strategic hub for Europe. Today, leadership is innovation, and we must unite in sovereignty, security, and growth. Europe must be a leader led with responsibility and ambition for the future. Thank you.
Very much. Now, Javier Moreno Sanchez, 1 minute.
Bienvenue, Monsieur le Premier Ministre.
Welcome, Prime Minister. Your speech was full of hope, and you, as a citizen of Luxembourg, a founding member of the European Union, has always been at the very heart of the European Union. To go back to nationalism and the times of the past is not a good approach. We have decided to face up to a common destiny. So there's only one answer to nationalism. The answer is more Europe. To face up to poverty, to climate challenges, to housing problems, to matter approaches and immigration. The European Social Fund and the Common Agricultural Policy can help us. Going back to national states is a very dangerous paradigm. We need a united Europe to keep peace and democracy in the face of threats, and to face up to the trade wars, the senseless trade wars. And we will stand behind you moving towards this European soul.
1 minute.
Frau Präsidentin, Herr
President, Prime Minister, colleagues. Smaller and medium-sized states in Europe can do much more. They can punch above their weight. Luxembourg is a prime example. It's economically very strong. It's committed above and beyond the call of duty, and that's the way Luxembourg has been working for tens of years, and we need to do the same to strengthen Europe's economic standing. It's only in this way that we can really tackle the problems that we face, whether it's a social model that needs to be funded with an aging population. Luxembourg, a founding member state, has made many steps forward, but the last wave enlargement goes back a long way to 2013. So we need to enlarge now to the Western Balkans, and we need to strengthen Europe, not go back to nation states as mistakenly is being advocated by the patriots. Thank you.
Grazie, dear Prime Minister. Government's AI strategy to achieve digital sovereignty by 2030. Soon we will be halfway through the evaluation of the European digital decade, and unfortunately we are not meeting our targets. We need to learn fast, because the digital transition is not waiting and we need to catch up. The fact is that Europe has become overly dependent on foreign technological infrastructure provided mainly by big US tech corporations. One of those, Amazon, is based in your country and by now is the biggest employer in Luxembourg. It makes me wonder how you deliver on sovereign cloud solutions and other infrastructural aspects that underpin your AI supercomputer ecosystem. What is the interaction between Amazon Web Services and the sovereign technological stack that you are aiming for? Could you enlighten us and also the Commission with your approach in this quest for a tech ecosystem and AI development in line with our democratic values and the rules of AI Act and the GDPR? Thanks a lot.
Thank you. That concludes the round of speakers. I have 5 spots for Catch the Eye, and I will give them 1 per political group, starting with Danuše Nerudová.
Dear Prime Minister, this weekend in the Czech Republic, a populistic billionaire Andrej Babiš won the elections, despite the corruption. Sorry, guys, but I'm speaking. Despite the corruption scandals, and he will probably govern with his allies, accused of violence on women and hate speech. And the trend is spreading because populists and extremists are leading the polls in Austria, Germany, and France. Our liberal democracy is really sick. But Luxembourg remains a fortress resilient against the wave of populism and extremism. And let me ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, what is the secret? I believe in the young generation. I think that we should give them more space and more power. And I believe that young generation can heal our democracy.
Thank you, Ms. Nerudová. Next is Vytenis Andriukaitis.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You were right when you said that you represent a small state in the EU. However, we know all only too well that there are only 2 types of countries in the EU, the small ones and the ones that don't understand that they are small. France and Germany. We have the nationalists and patriots over there, and they don't understand that they are small. Nobody understands that when they refer to the grand of their past, and they don't understand that they are pushing themselves into the pit. Today, more than ever, we need more integration. Prime Minister, the convention is necessary, and it's necessary to change the composition and strengthen the EU. This is the response that we should transmit to everyone. I would like to wish you courage and to raise this question in the Council of Europe, and the necessity to implement urgent reforms, because we are so much late, everyone. We are all small.
We have a couple of more minutes, so I will give the floor to another couple more. Sebastian Tynkönen.
Madam President, entire neighbourhoods of once great cities taken over by people who are neglecting our values. Women choosing not to go out simply because they want to avoid the gruesome fate of being assaulted or raped, or worse. Pedestrians mutilated by machete-wielding robbers. Small children caught in the middle of a gunfight between rival drug gangs. Teachers beheaded by radical fundamentalists. Dear colleagues, dear Prime Minister, this is Europe. And the ugly truth is, these are the victims of the terrible mistakes the politicians in Europe have created. They have been betrayed their own people, and they have betrayed those who built Europe. If we continue on the same path, Europe will be no longer. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor now to Reinier van Lanschot.
Dear Prime Minister, you said it's up to us to dream about the future. And I agree. 40 years ago, European leaders dreamed of the future in a tiny village in Luxembourg. They decided to do something new. They opened borders, and what started in Schengen proved to be a massive success, the freedom of movement. You also said too many Europeans have lost faith in the EU, but polls show that 9 out of 10 Europeans want more European integration. From Portugal to Romania, from Greece to the Netherlands, people realize we are Europe. It's not the people who've lost faith, it's the political leaders. The new ideas are here. A European Defence Union, faster EU enlargement, a digital single market. But every European Council meeting, no decisions. Today, everyone knows Schengen. So I ask you, what future do you dream of? What new things will you do? And what tiny village in Luxembourg will you make famous next?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next is Lucas Sieper.
Dear people of Europe, dear Mr. Frieden, what is Europe? To answer that question, we do not have to look far, just on the screen, where the title of our debate includes the name of our honourable guest, Frieden. Frieden, the German word for peace. For centuries, the people of Europe fought each other, from empires to kingdoms, from crowns to nations, until the first half of the 20th century, when humanity saw its darkest crimes committed by my own people. After that, for the first time, Europeans came together, not to conquer, but to unite. And while we still see conflict from the Balkans to Cyprus, there has been no war engulfing all of Europe since. Today, peace again is under threat on Europe's borders, but the idea of peace beats strong in our hearts, in our minds, and in this house. Europe is Frieden. Frieden with the past, Frieden with the present, and Frieden as a promise to the future.
Thank you very much. Sean Kelly.
Europe is made up of big countries and small countries, and often the small countries think the big countries dominate. And yet we had one of the biggest countries, the United Kingdom, leaving the European Union under the pretext of lack of sovereignty, which they are now beginning to realise is a mistake. On the contrary, small countries can make a huge contribution, and you yourself, being President of the Parliament, like Pat Cox from Ireland, shows that, as do, for instance, David O'Sullivan and Catherine Day becoming Secretary-Generals of the European Commission. And then, of course, we have Robert Schuman, the father of Europe, and Jean-Claude Juncker, who became President of the Commission and had a very successful tenure. And indeed, it shouldn't be forgotten that it was under Jean-Claude Juncker that the Juncker plan was introduced, which revolutionised investment financing in the European Union, which helped us get over the economic crisis. So big or small, we can be very successful. As the Prime Minister of Luxembourg said, Era Luxembourg agus onentas.
Ireland, Luxembourg and the Union forever.
Thank you very much. Juan Fernando López Aguilar.
Gracias, Presidenta.
President, thank you. Prime Minister, a Europeanist Luxembourg in a union where there are no big or small players, where we all have shared tasks. Luxembourg is the home for two federalist institutions. We cannot do that, however, on their own. We need the European Parliament to do its part. We have to have the regulations on unanimity revised. Then Schengen, of course. Freedom of movement is important, but we also need to complete the internal market and perfect it and do away with unfair tax competition. So we have to definitely support tax harmonization. Prime Minister, show your Europeanist vocation and show that you can act as a great European nation, Luxembourg.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, I have to say that it's been quite some time since I've listened to an opinion so clearly articulated with regards to the future of Europe. Congratulations, Prime Minister, and I'm sure the Commissioner being here will tell the President of the Commission that, yes, we do have solutions. To pick up on what you said, democracy is founded on trust. Prime Minister, don't you believe that we will have more trust if we have social cohesion, social fairness, if we truly build that single market and have the same opportunities for citizens? That's how to grow trust. And please tell the President of the Commission when you get a chance. You said we lost a sense of urgency. Yes, that's right, Prime Minister. We have a lot of leftover homework. And this is how, unfortunately, we fed skepticism. We fed those who mistrust the EU. So please take these solutions and apply them.
Minister, you have heard a wide-ranging, very long and intense debate. I think this gives you a flavour of the conversations we have inside this Parliament. I'll give you the floor now to conclude and respond to as many of the interventions as you want.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, thank you. I am very proud of the Luxembourgish language, but I also want everyone to understand what I'm about to say. So I chose the language, a beautiful language of a neighbouring country, the French language, to address you. The European project remains a beautiful peace project, a project for prosperity and democracy. And I think everything we heard this morning just reflects the diversity we have in Europe. And I think we can be proud that in Europe it is possible to speak freely, to express one's views freely. And so what I observe is that alone we are weakest, together we are stronger. And that goes for our populations, but also our countries. We need to dialogue and progress together. Robert Schuman, who was mentioned today, born in Luxembourg, who went to school in Luxembourg and became foreign minister and a founding father of Europe, said, Europe will not be built overnight, and it will not be built in one fell swoop. First, we need to have solidarity, de facto solidarity, and I think it's that de facto solidarity that we're building. It's built on the principle of stability, values, the principle of competitiveness. Yes, stability first. People asked me why Luxembourg was successful as it was. But that's because Luxembourg has always been trying to build a strong economy that serves its people, has been strengthening its economy whilst also not neglecting the ecological and digital transitions. That means you have to be willing to compromise. If you double down on your position, and you cannot make progress. You will simply have conflict. So it must be possible for us to make compromises in Europe as well. But the second principle is that values must always underpin those compromises. Europe is all about its values and the rules that govern it. We have an international order that is built on laws and values. And that's why we must fight for values in the European Union and beyond. And that applies to Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting for our values and our freedoms. And in the Middle East, if we support this two-state solutions, it's because of our belief in international law and dialogue. And for the same reason as a country, we support sanctions not against Israel, but the Netanyahu government, which is not respecting international humanitarian law. Values is also about what we're seeing on social networks. Our democracy is strong, yes, but it is also vulnerable. And so I support all European measures that try to get some handle on what can be said, tries to define what is sayable. When you say things on the social media platforms, there are limits to that. It's all about respecting other people. There's no place for hatred, discrimination, or lies. And so I also believe all initiatives that seek to rein in the contents and what's being said is worth supporting. And I say that to all parents and all children who are now trying to build their own critical thinking skills. It's the task for parents, for schools, but also for us as European legislators. Competitiveness has many sides. But without competitiveness, without job creation, we cannot have a strong social welfare state. So we must ensure that legislation is streamlined and less complex. I don't accept this dichotomy between deregulation and simplification. Of course, we must have regulation. When we layer one regulation on top of another, there comes a point when you have to ask yourself whether we're still meeting the objectives of the legislation itself. I had some time out from politics before coming back to politics, and I was seeing that in the businesses that I was active in, we've got almost as many people dealing with compliance and legislation as the number of people dealing with customer service, innovation. And I think that is something that needs to be rebalanced. It needs to be a healthy balance. You should have more people dealing with development, research, innovation, and then those people dealing solely with compliance. And on the ecological transition, it's absolutely necessary, yes, but we must bring citizens along, companies along, and encourage them to take part in that transition rather than pushing them into unrealistic trajectories. Yes, climate change is real. Climate adaptation is necessary and real, but let's bring people and companies on board. And what this means is that we must have a Europe for which there's no alternative, a Europe that includes the big and small countries. The big states, member states of the European Union, may sometimes forget that they are small member states too when you look at the global context. And so we need a Europe that works for the benefit of its people and defends the values of peace, liberty, democracy, and diversity and inclusion, so that we can make sure those values remain the hallmarks of our continent. Finally, we need to have a strong politics of the centre that was going to build compromises, that's going to bring people together, because if we don't have a strong centre, we will have a polarisation and policies of the extreme politics of the extreme confrontation, and that's not going to build peace or prosperity for Europe. So let us work together, Parliament, Council and Commission, so that we can build a Europe tomorrow that will allow us all to live in peace and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We will return in 1 minute for the votes. We now come to the votes. We start with a report by David Cormand on the request for waiver of the immunity of Michał Dworczyk.